promised and I delivered. Well, I'm delivering. Becky Mass is here, everybody. I'm trying to work back into doing more interviews. I'm trying to find the time. And somehow, in the worst week ever of trying to get anything done, I get some shit done. So that's how we do things here at the Almost Agreement podcast. We're doing what we can. So Becky Mass is going to sit in. We're going to talk about some stuff and go from there. We're Almost Agreement at gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Go to our website, almostagreement.com. There you can get all our episodes as well as contacts and stuff like that. Go to your favorite podcast provider. Like, friend, follow, share, 5-star review. Anything you can do to help get the word out. Tell your friends about us. For those of you following campaigns and stuff like that, these are the people. If you like the candidate, share it so that more people can hear about it. If you don't like the candidate, share it so more people can agree with you, hating them, or whatever. So, sadly, we're going to be one of very few sources that have any real conversations with these candidates before election time. So, Becky Massey, District 6, State Senator for the state of Tennessee. Here we go. Okay, so I've been teasing for many moons now of trying to get back in the saddle about getting more interviews going. I got real lazy there for a little bit, and so I have Becky Massey here. We've got a campaign coming up, but first we have a new session coming up, and so we got lots of stuff to talk about. So first of all, I love seeing you at the parade. The parade is my favorite thing that I've done. That was my last official parade, at least with Scouts. I don't know if I'm gonna. I've thrown around the idea of doing a podcast live from a float one year, which would be kind of fun.
It'd be fun.
Yeah, I think the 4th of July parade would be a more...
but it was wet
It was very wet this year.
All the parades were... It was a wet year.
It was a wet year. And so... but I think the 4th of July parade makes more sense for me. Like, yes. It just seems... Because then I can chase you guys and there's more candidates around. Although Tim Burchett was there, and I got to talk to him for the first time. And then I actually went and interviewed him in his office. And that was the second time I've been in that Duncan Federal building for your brother, I guess, his predecessor. And then now I've gotten to go see him. So that's always fun, going through that security and forgetting about how much stuff I have in my pockets because I don't pay that much attention. I don't usually go into secure facilities, and so I don't think about that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Like the big screaming object in the room, I guess, is going to be the voucher conversation. I think that's the number one in at least in my circles of people that are getting most excited about. But let's start it this way. What are you looking forward to most? What is some stuff that you're working on or have been a part of coming up into this session that you're excited to get moving?
Well, and it's always good to be with you. We first started this a few years ago and got to know each other.
I know. I was thinking about it. The last time you were here was before I redid the room, and it's been like a year plus since I redid the room.
Yeah.
Because we were out in the bigger room before, and it was less...
But I think I first came in and interviewed with you in 2011 when I first ran.
No.
It wasn't?
No, not 2011. We were... Our first show was 2020. Maybe 2019.
Okay.
It was your last run.
Okay.
But
I feel like it's been a while.
This is like the third or fourth time that we've talked together on air, but it hadn't gone quite that long. But
so I do have a couple of bills that I've carried over from last year. We didn't get funding. We didn't get all the details worked out, which a lot of times it does take a little bit to get things worked out. But the first one is similar to the Tennessee Promise, but it's called Promise and Futures. And I think many people talk about how child care is such a challenge. Mm-hmm. There's people that aren't working because of the cost of child care or, either being affordable or accessible. And so a couple of years ago, we passed a bill looking at a child care task force, and it was my bill, and we did a deep dive in it. And there's about an economic loss to Tennessee, about $2 billion a year because of inadequate child care.
But so that's based on working capable people who are choosing not to work because they can't get child care, or the math doesn't make sense.
Can't afford it, right. Math doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because that's one of the issues.
Or they can't get into a decent one.
Sure, because that's a problem I'm having, not directly personally, but one of my employees is having that problem, and she has a special needs child, very young, so not even 2 yet. And she really wants to do better than her mom. Not that there's anything wrong with her mom per se, but a special needs kid, and it's mom, can you take the kid? Mom, can you take the kid? And mom has her own financial set of issues, and so she's ended up trying to pay for, basically her attempt at paying for childcare is now basically paying her mom's majority of her mom's living expenses,
Right.
which is as expensive or not more expensive than a lot of daycares are. And so I've been trying to help navigate what's available for her. So that is something that touches me personally, just because I'm trying to do the best I can for whom I can. And so that's just one. So, but anyway, I'm sorry, continue.
Basically, the Promise and Futures is like a last dollar scholarship, like the Tennessee Promise is. So they, folks that would be eligible, some lower income folks that are struggling with this, would apply for the supplements and the stipends that are available, because there are quite a few that a lot of times people don't know about. But they get that, and then this would cover the last dollars. It would be covered like the Tennessee Promise is covering through the basic lottery. This would be through the sports betting money.
Okay.
And it's where the funding would come from. So we're kind of working through that. They, wanted to, before they added anything new to any of the lottery type funding mechanisms, they wanted to try to make sure it was fully funded. And so we're getting close to that, and we'll be working through this bill. The second piece is we go from kids to elderly, and this is the Elder Financial Abuse Bill. And we started out working on that last year. There's just identified there's $500 million a year stolen from seniors. And
right, for some reason, some of the phone company, the phone callers think that I'm a senior because I get them constantly.
But we're not.
If you're on Medicare, right? It's like no.
We're not talking about as much the phone call that wants a $50 gift card or whatever, or the emails, but more so the people. 50% of these that's stolen is stolen by people the elders know. And 70% is substance abuse related. We're talking about getting grandma to go to the bank, take out her life savings, maybe 100, 200, 300, $500,000 even, but take out their life savings to give to this family member or somebody they know in a lot of cases. But the banks actually have what's called a pause law now. It's a federal law that they can kind of say, hey, well, we're not sure about this. But these are their customers. They don't want to make their customers mad, or they'd lose the whole account or whatever. So what this would do would be to set up a call center at our Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. We're working with Deputy Director David Roush, who used to be our police chief. And they would set up a call center so the employees of the bank that are suspicious could call the call center. They could deploy an agent out to check it out pretty quick and to follow up on it, and hopefully recover and or keep from happening the elders being preyed upon for their life savings. So those are two.
So it's kind of on the premise of I'm trying to think of I should have gone to law school because I know the words for these kind of things, but that's kind of on the premise of under duress, maybe, that they're making the decision under duress, not really having the full capacity of understanding what's going on and what this person is actually asking them for. Right.
I mean, it's, they're using these elderly people, whether they're preying upon their emotions, like, well, I can't work. I don't have a car. I need to go buy a car. I'm going to lose my house. I found a house to buy. Can you help me with the down payment? It's $100,000. Or different things, or it can be people they don't know, but it can be a lover scheme or different things like that. So, but we've had a local fella in our district attorney's office here that has kind of been working in this area that has done some pretty good work in recovering things, but this is something that we do want to take statewide. And TBI is excited about it. It's just a matter of getting it funded. And that's always the fun thing. You have great ideas, but getting them funded. So those are the two things. There's a couple other bills that we're going to work on. One is like an age verification for minors on certain websites that are pretty much porn related, or something kind of like what they have on if you go onto an alcohol site. And you have to, you don't identify yourself, just your date and birth date.
Right. Which isn't really hard to skip over, but at least some percentage won't bother. because they don't want to get caught,
Right.
or they're really bad at math and put their own birth date in, but try to change the year and still don't get them to 21.
Change the month instead of the year.
Yeah, something like that. I can see it having some positive effect. There's nothing.
And we're still working to finalize my agenda. I mean, we're still discussing people.
Right, you guys are supposed to work this week, right?
Oh yes,
just like the rest of us, and we just took the week off.
We've had meetings on phones and things like that. But as far as finalizing, I've got another piece that we did part way last year, and it's called Abriel's Law, and it kind of strengthens the training in the court system for domestic violence and child sex abuse. And so we're wanting to strengthen it a little further, and so we're going to continue to work on that this year too.
So what do we mean strengthen? Like what is?
Well, I mean, there's cases and there's more. It's more than just like anecdotal. There are cases of judges putting a child. Okay, let's say I was a victim of domestic violence. I had 2 children. The first one was abused, so they couldn't go be with that father. But the judge would order visitation for the younger child. I mean, or they would mom because. And it can be either sex, but mom doesn't, because she left the husband that was abusing her, doesn't have the funds for permanent housing. So they put the kid back with the dad who was the abuser. So just, educating people, bringing the court systems that up to date more and bringing in expert witnesses. So we're going to continue to work on that because no child should be subject to that.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I'm not a fan of that. Okay. So, It is an election year, so it's going to get real exciting, and it's going to be a real fast year if history holds true. Generally, election cycle, even any even year in state government tends to go a little quicker than the odd years because you can't get to, well, at least fundraising, but really campaigning until session's over.
Correct.
And so I know one of the very first things I talked to you about is like how crazy I think it is on how many things you guys have to touch, especially you as a senator. The House is even. The House has, at least as a percentage by person or whatever, has less. I guess as a total, you guys touch about the same number of things. But, you have you're like 5-1 to House members, right?
3.
3-1?
3. And
so for the House members that max out at like 20 or 10 apiece? 20 apiece.
They can
introduce.
Through their rules, they can do 15 bills.
Okay, it's 15. So right between my memories.
If you do the math, that's 45 for each senator. Now, if you chair a committee, like I chair the Transportation and Safety Committee, you have usually at least 5 or 6 or 7 bills that are just for your committee. So it's not uncommon to. I think I had about 55 on my list last year, but you don't. Some of them you don't run. Some of them you're getting on.
Right, you're doing a senatorial version of the House one that already exists. It's not you're making it up from scratch and having to go through thing. But you do have to rep it as far as when people have questions in the Senate side of it.
I have to get it through committee.
Right, you're the one that's going to answer the questions and help explain the points and purposes of it. And that's a lot. I mean, especially again, I would think this. Whether passing hopefully sooner than later, that we can get down to work and stuff like that. I would think you guys are trying to get out by May. At the latest?
We typically get out by the end of April, 1st of May, and I don't suspect it'd be any different this year.
If anything, it'll be on the early side of that window rather than the late.
Yeah, maybe the 3rd week of April.
Yeah.
We did lose a week this week, but it was still, there wasn't a lot on the agenda this week. This was a week that people were still... A little
orientation for some people and getting back into the grind.
Well, this is when you're talking to people and trying to finalize your legislation. You're trying, if I've got a bill, I'm trying to find a House sponsor to carry it. If they've got a bill, they're reaching out to us and saying, hey, would you look at this bill? Would you consider carrying it?
Right. Okay. So let's wind back into what I think is going to be the biggest, at least media-wise, I think this voucher conversation's got to be number 1A. And I find this especially fascinating since we are in an election year, because all the House members are up, and then select percentage half the Senate is. It's an even number.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you represent an even number district, you're up.
Okay, we were talking about that a couple weeks ago. That there was some sort of.
And if you're an odd number district, you run when the governor's on the ballot.
Okay, neat. All right.
And if you've got 2 senators totally in the same county, like Senator Briggs and I, we cannot be on the ballot at the same time. He's an odd number district. I'm even.
Okay, that helps explain a conversation me and one of the other guys had a couple weeks ago about there was something in Nashville because when they did some redistricting, the numbering got weird because it was likely, now that you're explaining it, is that the dates were lining up that they're where they're not supposed to. Okay, because he was trying to explain it to me and he wasn't doing a very good job. Yours was much better than his explanation. Okay, so I don't know. This one fascinates me. I'm on, I guess the nicest way to say it is I'm on the fence. I'm open to the premise. I like to have conversations about possibilities. I think one of the biggest issues we have politically across the board, whether it's schools or not, is that we have a tendency to assume what should continue. And I think schools is probably the biggest example of that. This is how we've always done schools. This is how schools work. We don't change the way we do schools. And it's like, well, okay, maybe. But I think it's one of those interesting unmetric makeable things is that I think if you ask people, them and their kids at their school, 60+% are going to be like, yeah, we like our schools. And even in the public school side of stuff, they're going to say, yeah, we like our schools. I'm one of that other half for the most part. But my kids' friends and their parents and talking to them about this because this is what I'm into, they're like, yeah, I'm really happy with the school. I'm really happy with what's going on here and stuff like that. It's like, okay. And so it's really confusing to try to figure out the genesis of why we're pushing this direction. But at the same time, to me, it's like, well, let's have conversations about different ways to do things. Like, how can we make this better? Because me as a professional is probably more why I'm a school hater than not. Because me as a professional, even in my, the nice word, I'm a lower tier bracket of employer. Most of my employees are not minimum wage. Nobody pays minimum wage, at least in Knox County anymore. But the lower end of the state wage gap because of what we do, and that's, I don't have guilt about that part of it. But it's like I'm also not asking for much for what I'm like I feel like it's a fair agreement. I'm going to pay you this amount because I'm not really asking you to do anything really super complicated, technical, hard. Anything that you need to learn to do the job, I'm going to teach you. So that's the exchange, and so. It's been really tough. It's been really tough. Like I've had a number of employees, especially over the last year, where it's like we're paying at least twice minimum wage starting, and it's like you're not worth this much, and they don't last that long. Right. And they don't last that long because I can't do it anymore because I can't be like this doesn't make sense. How can you not, just like I make jokes about writing checks, and I get why that one's not as popular anymore. But just like simple math stuffs on counting bills to give change back to people. It's just like it. I don't understand it. Like I can't even explain it fully how frustrating it is with the employee base that I have to choose from. Maybe that's a good way to put it. And I acknowledge that it's not a solely school responsibility, but I feel like it's a pretty good part of it. To go back to the beginning of my story, it's like I think it's worth having a conversation about it. Now, I'm really confused on the funding stuff, and like you said earlier, it's all about funding and where the funding comes from and how these things work. But I'm also really interested in how this is going to go politically in the election process. And so I'm not exactly sure where my question is and all that, other than, this isn't a new thing. It's not like this just popped up yesterday. No. This is something that Governor Lee's been active about. And for all intents and purposes, the Tennessee right has been pushing this direction for a decade at least. And so I guess the question would be, why do you think it's now that we're actually getting enough traction to get there? That we're actually seeing something happen for the first time, even though this isn't new. And then where are you in this kind of shakedown?
Okay, well, let me back up and just talk.
I know I jumped a lot. Go ahead.
You jumped around, and let me talk a little bit about the process. So there have been versions of a voucher bill, school choice bill, for a few years, and we did pass several years ago one for 2 counties. It was going to be bigger, but it was narrowed down, and so this is kind of the second bite of the apple.
Right, it was Shelby and Davidson County with a pilot.
Davidson County,
right.
and the Achievement School Districts. And so this past year, the chair of the Judiciary Committee actually brought a bill bringing Hamilton County in it. The House, after it was already passed on the Senate floor, the House basically added Knox County back.
Right.
But there was really no conversations between the
two
bodies. It kind of broke down, and because the sponsor did not have enough votes on the Senate floor to to accept the House version did not accept the House version. Okay?
Right, because that's one of the interesting things in that. Because I was that Zachary was one of the handful in that mess, because it was you'll vote for the bill as long as your district is not included.
Well, that was the first one back.
Right.
That was back in my
18, 19, something like that. Yeah,
my years blend a little bit. But so the governor did, of course, last year the governor's big major piece of legislation was the Transportation Modernization Act, which I carried for the governor, and it was an exciting bill. We can talk about that after a while. But
because I'll tell you what, I've been driving around the interstates, and the interstates have been great through all this.
Okay.
Anyway,
we just don't have enough of them. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so a governor will really kind of have their number one agenda that they really want to focus on in a given year, and so that he decided that this was the one thing he wanted to focus on this year, that this Education Opportunity Act, I believe is what they're calling it. But anyway, so the bill, we have not seen the bill yet. We know the bones of it, but we have not seen it. I do not serve on the Education Committee. So it will go to Education Committee first. It will then go to Finance Committee to make sure the funding is there. And because nothing can come out of the Finance Committee if there's not funding in the budget for it. And they've got to have that figured out. So I will not even begin to have a say on it other than casual conversations until it passes both of those committees and comes to a floor vote. At that point, it will almost have enough votes to pass because of the numbers, just the basic numbers to get through those two committees. And so,
how many people are in a committee?
Well, there's 9 on education, and there's 11 on finance. And now
so
there's a little
bit
of carryout. There's a little bit of. I mean, technically, you only have to have 5 and 6 votes,
right.
But it will have, I suspect, more than that if it passes out.
I mean, if it's 100%, that's 20 votes.
It won't be 100%.
Right, I'm just saying, but if it were 100% of the two committees...
That would be 20 votes, and you only have to have 19 to pass it on the floor.
Oh, okay.
I mean, 17, excuse me. Sorry, 17.
Okay.
So
I'm so used to getting on the House side of it that I was...
Yeah, it's 17 with 33 senators, and you have to pass a bill with 50% plus 1.
Right.
So I will not be in the middle of these conversations until it's probably almost too late.
It's too late. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
But in the past, I have not. I could argue both sides of a voucher bill. I really could. I see the pros. I see the cons. And in the past, I haven't necessarily voted against the ones that have come up. I've just not voted for them. Because I felt like primarily public dollars needed to be targeted for public schools. And that, I come from a line of public educators, from my grandparents to my sister to sister-in-law and brother-in-law, long line, best friends. But that was kind of where my vote had been on those particular bills. In each bill, you can't just say at the beginning, hey, I'm all the way for it. You can, I don't. I'm all the way for it or I'm all the way against it until you really look at the bill, see what it's doing, talking to your constituents and folks in your district. And
right, because this is what I find most frustrating about this whole thing is that I think where what you're discussing is where it actually comes to a point where you get to actually pay it, like really start looking at what you're looking at and start making a decision on it. That's the same time I get to.
Right.
Because even if I'm paying super close attention and I'm watching it through these subcommittees, there's nothing official to get to you, or for me to get to you about, like, this is why you need to vote. My opinion is you should vote this way or the other.
Right.
And the reasons for, because I could cite it, because it doesn't exist yet, really, loosely, because that's been one of the most frustrating things with me about a lot of this stuff is that we have these, there's the fun technical term, but I just call them placeholders, that we put up, because everything has to be introduced right here at the beginning.
You have, it's February 1st is the bill filing deadline.
Right, and so as long as it's in the right category of bills, you can just completely kind of re-gut the initial idea and throw it back out there later.
As long as it opens that section of the code.
Right. As long as it's in the wheelhouse of things, you can't completely go random on it. But
most bills really are more bills. It's your caption bills is what the terminology is.
You'd think as long as I've done this, I'd start picking up these phrases.
Oftentimes, a caption bill, sometimes it's not even a bill people are planning on running. What happens is things happen during session and an industry, a particular interest may need, let's just say the mobile home building, the manufactured home building industry needed a bill, and something came up, whether it was federal or state, that
negated
that they needed
right.
a bill. They wouldn't want to wait till the next year, so they will have a caption bill as a placeholder in case they needed something. That is the primary use of caption bills. There are a few caption bills that are filed that people really are still working on the language to try to get it to where it needs to be.
Right, because I do have one, maybe a suggestion for one for you I have a personal need for. Because this hemp law thing, which I do want to go a little bit further into it, is where we as the industry are quite upset about it. Because we were sold it one way, and now that agriculture's getting to work on its part of it,
right? It's their regulations and everything.
It's really it was okay. Let me for context for people. I know I've talked about it a bunch on the show, but I'll go ahead and put it out anyway. So the hemp law came in last year. 5% sales tax revenue's got to deal with that, and then definitions and the bureaucratic side as far as paperwork and stuff like that through agriculture, as well as inspections and all that kind of jazz is going on that side. Revenue gets started right away, and so I've already been paying taxes on it since this last July, even though nobody at Revenue or Agriculture could give me a clear answer on what I'm supposed to be taxing this way, which was very upsetting to me because I'm trying to do it right. Like I spent almost the entire month of June on the phone trying to figure out how to set this up correctly.
Do you not know a state senator's office that you could have called that could have helped?
And I think I did. I don't remember if I talked to you. I know I talked to Gloria's office. I called. I put some emails out to a couple different people. I think I actually went through your office on this one as well.
Okay, I hope so. I can't that's what they're there for, is to try to help get answers to people.
I absolutely did because I was trying. Because I remember
you would have talked to probably Carly.
Right. One of my great gifts I've decided that I've attained in my lifetime is to set up analogies to make things that are completely foreign to people make more sense. And so I was basically trying to explain to her. I was like, well, when this thing was first set up, it was just it's hemp-related products get this 5% tax. It's like, okay, cool. Well, actually, that's what it was. It was when after the first month. Okay, all right. Let me back up a second. All right. So I'm on the phone the whole time with Agriculture. Agriculture's like, well, we're not doing anything until the beginning of 24. We don't have to, so we're not going to start doing anything until there. And I'm on the phone with Revenue. It's like, well, what exactly am I taxing on? Because there's lots of different substrains here. There's a bunch of different things at play. Which one is the correct one so I can make sure I'm doing this right? And they're like, well, we don't know. That's up to Agriculture. Okay, cool. And so I just kind of guessed at it, and we go through July, which is the first month. I have my computer set up, so it's doing it for me automatically. I do too many transactions to try to keep up with individual basis. And so I get to the end of July, 1st of August, I start working on filing my taxes for my sales tax return for July. And Revenue now wants it divided by substrate. So I'm back on the phone, and this is when I called your office, because I'm back on the phone going, that's not what you told me a month ago when I spent weeks and weeks and weeks going back and forth on the phone trying to set this up. There's no way realistically for me to go back and get this accurate. Well, give us your best, just do the best you can. You're not going to get audited, which I take that as a threat because I'm a defensive person, because what that says to me is that I could be audited for this. Maybe you won't do it. That's great, but
yeah,
this is auditable when I'm doing my best to do it right, which is super frustrating. And so this is what I get on the office, and I'm talking to Carly, if I recall correctly, and I put the analogy to her. It's like, the state has a special liquor tax. We pay an extra, 6%, whatever, on liquor tax. The Department of Revenue doesn't ask me if it's tequila or whiskey. They just ask me if it's 30% or greater, whatever the definition of the state is. Why are we doing it differently on this one? And to me, which I ended up being right, is there's no reason that they're doing this other than to try to figure out what people want and which one's the better seller. Why, I'd be curious, and this is maybe a real question for you that I don't expect you to answer now, but maybe you could, maybe we can go with Carly and we can do some research. I'd be curious of the strains that they're asking for, what the actual breakdown in revenue is. The Department of Revenue has to have that, right?
I guess.
So I don't know who to ask is, I guess, my question here.
Well, I mean, we'd check if it's revenue's the one that's getting it. We would check with them. I would.
Okay, I will formulate that in a big fat email, and I'll send that to your office. We'll see if we can get that answer for me. That's more a curiosity than what's going on currently. But I mean, currently the issue to me is that when some of my vendors and other people that are in the industry, we were talking about this bill as it was going down. They're like, "Yeah, we're on board. This is going to be great. This is going to get us a nice, clear legal lens, so we know what we're doing, and we don't have to worry about what people ask us: is this legal or not? It's not even it's a gray area anymore. It's no, this is 100% legal. This thing went into effect last year. Blah blah blah. And we try really hard to keep our staff educated so that they can tell people because." Most people for their entire lives, anything close to marijuana was illegal in this state. And so they're a little bit like, are we sure about this? And like, yes, here's the law. Here's why.
Right.
And we were promised. I mean, that was, I was promised that this was going to solidify what we're doing and we were going to be good moving forward. And it's a huge chunk. The THCA, which is the one that's in question in the definition, is a huge chunk of our total portfolio. And it will be a large hit to our bottom line. And just like to me, it's like, well, we were told X, and the whole time I knew it was going to come out as Y. I knew it, and I was telling the guys, for all our vendors and stuff, as we were talking about, I was like, I get what you guys are going for here, and I would love that to be the truth, but I can't help myself but know that there's something behind this. There's somewhere in this, and so the real question in all of this, that is the most confusing part specifically, is how did it go from? I mean, at least according to revenue right now, this is a category that we're collecting taxes on. This is a specific substrain. The whiskey tequila division, as we were discussing, that they are asking us, like, this is on the Dropbox. This isn't like an other or fill in the blank. This is there's 6 that come down in the Dropbox when you're filing. This is one of them that comes down in the Dropbox. So revenue was planning on collecting taxes on this particular one. So it seems to me that the understanding was this was going to be one of the particular ones. And so how does agriculture get the ability to change at least what the known understanding was that we were all been operating under? Like, where does the authority lie in this truly in this conversation? Because it feels to me like agriculture is doing this on their own accord. And I mean that saying that I'm sure that there are other people, whether it's other senators, maybe the governor's office, I don't know, who are talking to them as well. But it seems like this is outside of what the law was written for that we all agreed to. That's what's happening in front of this one.
Well, I would need to look at it more because that's not something I knew there was some issue with agriculture and inspections and different things. But
I mean, the real specific the rule as ag has written it is Tennessee is traditionally, since any of this stuff started, even with the CBD, the precursor to all this conversation, it's always a weight by volume. It's always been a dry weight by volume. And for this one particular strain, they want to do it as a burnt weight, which just it changes functionally in the burning process. It's kind of the point. Let's be honest about it. THCA, when burned, turns into the Delta-9, which is what everybody wants anyway. It's the closest thing to marijuana as we know it that we can legally currently get in the state of Tennessee, and that's why it's the top seller for us, because that's what people want. And so the bottom line to me is that we were sold on, yes, that's going to stay inside the new definition. And then as soon as it comes into place, it's flipping over on us. And so, like but again, the point being is that the everything else that we do anywhere in the realm of hemp products is dry weight. Basically, like that's a rosemary plant next to you because my studio is turned into our winter greenhouse. And so like if I take that rosemary plant, take a chunk off, we grind it up, we put it through the machine. And the machine tells us what % of what chemicals is in that plant. That's how we've always done it in the hemp game. But just with this one variant, we're burning it and testing the smoke instead. And that's really that's that. But everything else we do in this realm, it's always that dry weight, and it's that very specific definitional change that has the huge functional change that is my concern.
Well, we'll try to figure it out for you.
And again, this is a bottom line issue to me. This is a money issue to me.
Yes, I get it.
And I know that you were on the medical side anyway. It was brother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
And that whole backstory, which is a wonderful backstory. Well, it's a crappy backstory because it's not accessible.
My brother-in-law died from ALS.
Yeah.
And, of course, then my brother's wife died from it was quicker, but it was major cancer.
But, I don't know. It might have been before my dad had lymphoma. It kind of popped up out of nowhere. Pretty sure it's Agent Orange related from when he was in Vietnam, blah, blah, blah. And it's so funny because my dad's that generation, like this, like they're like there's the of my dad's generation, there is either weed is the worst thing ever to existed, or we were hippies back then and we're still hippies now kind of people. Mm-hmm. My dad was definitely on the prior side of that conversation. And so like he's going through his chemo and stuff like that. And I got him some of our gummies, which were Delta 8 gummies, which are still perfectly legal and stuff like that. And I took it to him and I was like, just, you know, everybody that we have plenty of customers that come in regularly that are going through chemo, that it helps them with their appetite, helps them sleep, it helps with the pain. He's like, okay. And just leave it at that. Like 3 weeks later, he calls me. He's like, what were in those gummies? I was like, I told you what were in those gummies. It's like, I took one last night. It's like, last night? I gave them to you 3 weeks ago. He's like, yeah, I don't know. I was like, take them, Dad. It's like, what is the deal?
Yeah.
And like, he's so like, it's so ingrained in him that that's not okay.
Right.
And it sucks because he's like, that's the best I've slept in months. I woke up feeling good. I was hungry. I finally ate a full meal. I haven't eaten that much in one sitting and all that kind of stuff. I was like, you want some more? He's like, no, I'm good. I was like, okay, Dad. I'm trying here. I'm trying really hard. But, you know, and I think that's the number one. I think on the long term of the conversation, not that as that generation starts stepping out of the political process, especially, and the younger generation start taking over in politics, I think all these changes are going to come a lot faster.
Well,
because my dad votes every year. My wife doesn't.
Our medical cannabis bill, which was a light version of medical cannabis. It basically made it where it wasn't illegal. You could get it in other states, and it was only for certain diseases. But we had the votes in the Senate.
Right.
We passed it. We passed it through Health Committee, which never has gotten out of Health Committee. We passed it 8-1. We passed it out of Judiciary, which you never get it out of Judiciary, 5-4. And I had the votes on the floor, but then it went to a House committee, and there's 15 on that committee, and one member was supposed to pass, and it was going to pass. The speaker was in the back room to break the tie, and the person didn't pass. He voted against it.
Did he, though? Because House still does their voice votes. And
no, that one, they did
a roll call on it? That's one I would like.
I don't know if it was they had the numbers anyway. Okay. They had the numbers.
That's another one I would like fixed, but that's a House issue. I'll talk to my House people when I get
it. I can't. Believe me, I can't do it.
But like, your body does it. Like, I don't understand it. Why does
I don't either.
It doesn't make a lick of sense why one body would and the other wouldn't. It's crazy to me because I should be able to know. I should be able to go. Like, I should be able to go to the website, the Tennessee.gov, and I should go to Elaine Davis's page because she's my House rep, and I should be able to see on every subcommittee vote, on every whatever, yay, nay, next to her name. And then if I want something about whatever that particular yay, nay that she voted on, and I want to pull that up, I can see who voted yay, nay on that one too, and it should go down the list on everything. I don't like it. Just that seems crazy to me. Yeah, all the crazy stuff's happened in the House too. So I started to go down the new rules on going on in the chamber, but that's the House thing that's all weird about not letting the press and all that kind of stuff in. Like, how does that work comparatively? Like, I understand like each House gets to make their own kind of rules.
Well, I mean,
but like, is there any oversight, or is there anything that the Senate can be like, okay, House, you've started to lose your mind a little bit on a couple of these things. We need to figure something out here. Well,
I mean, there can be informal conversations, but no, not really. It's the traditional saying is the House is like a bunch of adolescent teenagers and the Senate's like a senior citizens home. I mean, but it's a smaller body. I know all 32 of my members that I serve with. I respect them. I may not agree with them all the time. I don't even agree with myself all the time, so that's okay. But I could go in any one of their offices at any time and sit down and have a conversation. So there's people in the Senate, because it is smaller and you do have to work closer together, may attack an issue but not the person. Whereas the House is bigger, they tend to have their 99. They tend to be a little bit more rambunctious just to get, be heard. And oftentimes there's people in the House that have been attacking the person and not the policy. And that causes more hard feelings. And, but we take care of our business and we do the work that we're sent there to do. And I don't have a vote in the House. I work with many of the House members and have a very good working relationship with them, but they set their own rules.
Okay. We got scattered, and it's my fault.
We did.
I know it is. It's what I do.
That's okay.
That's what I'm good at. And so I'm trying to go back to just make sure.
We were back on vouchers.
Right. We were close on the vouchers thing, and the time that it's come in the past, you've kind of You've abstained from voting mostly because it already was kind of cleared in subcommittee, or it didn't clear subcommittee. So
well,
I've
not voted for it. So at this point, I'm waiting to see the full bill. I'm also talking to a lot of people. I'm looking at the research from both Memphis and Nashville, and some of the other national research on it. But I also am going to be here shortly. I'll be probably in the next week or so have a poll that will go out in my newsletter, and then I'll post other places that, trying to get, and that will be one issue that will be polled on it. So I always say, you really do need to see what it is now. I mean, like I say, the part that I'm concerned about is, as far as on the negative side, is that public dollars ought to stay at public schools, although we have done a lot of extra funding in the last 10 years even. Just a lot of extra funding's gone to public schools. But I'm concerned about the special ed students. I have my background running Sertoma Center with serving folks with disabilities, that there's not services for kids with special needs in the private schools typically. I'm concerned about kids that may get the voucher and end up in a private school, but then may have some teenage emotional issues like a lot of our kids are having, and they don't. They either choose not to serve those kids, or they don't have the ability to serve those kids. On the plus side is that all kids learn differently. And the way I might learn may be different than the way you may learn. I actually learned well in a public school. In a smaller environment, I don't do as well. And so, but somebody else may be dyslexic. They may need different type of help. And as a parent that's paying dollars for my child's education, I should be able to direct where those dollars are used. So it's kind of like in the disability world, it's called money follows the person. So I get that. There is some.
So far, at least the early hits that premise that confuses me is that for us big counties like Knox and Davidson and Shelby and stuff like that, us bigger counties that in the current funding formula for schools, if I were to take my kids out and take a voucher, I would get more per child in a voucher than what my kid is getting in the public school.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of math involved in a lot of that, but
and the people that are supposed to do the math don't know how to do the math. I've had Ron McPherson on a number of times trying to understand the old funding formula, not even gotten into the new one yet.
The new one makes more sense. I never did totally understand the old formula.
Nobody understood BVP. Nobody.
But TISA, which is the acronym for it, it's very,
right. Everybody starts with X, and then different circumstantial issues or pluses or minuses as you go down.
Yes. So I mean, it does really make a lot of sense.
But I guess my concern in it is that I can acknowledge that as making logical sense. But it's like, okay, well, if my kids fall under X in the TISA formula, but I get X plus in voucher, how does that make sense? We don't know yet officially, but at least all indications currently that I've seen are the state pays about $5,500 or so per kid for me in Knox County schools, where they're going to be paying $73 or $75, which is going to be short of what the private school is going to cost anyway. But
right. Well, I mean, that's the other thing is that private schools, it's not going to cover everything, and plus it won't cover transportation. So it's not going to be for everybody. But I'm still doing my due diligence on the bill and having conversations. I am getting a lot of emails on it, and I expect to get a whole lot more.
I mean, the question to me, I think, is, and this kind of bridges the two different topics at once. Is like, I think the question to me is, how much is this going to be an electability issue versus this being or how much is this an electability issue? Not necessarily for you personally, but across the board as everybody who is running this year, and this being such a hot topic, even though it's passing. Any incumbent who's trying to stick around, they're going to be making this vote knowing this is part of their campaign cycle.
Well,
I mean, every vote is technically, but I think this one being such a loud one more than others.
mean, this will be one that people will be watching closer.
Right.
The problem is sometimes is you have some of these out-of-state groups that get involved in those kind of issues, and they bring extra money into a local race, and people, whether it's for or against someone, and people don't realize that it's not the candidate sending those mailings out.
That, or like there's a very good one of the guys that's running for property assessor is not the current, because the current is termed because of the way the property assessor things, but he was the prior.
Right.
And so he's running on a re-elect person, which is a true statement, but it's also kind of leaning towards that wink, wink, incumbent thing. If you like the current property assessor, you're like me. Well, that's not you.
Right.
But it looks like it, because that was our lovely sheriff race last even cycle, is we had two former sheriffs both asking to be reelected, and it just cracked me up. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing.
So anyway, it's going to be an interesting conversation, but again, I won't have a vote on it till near the end, and so.
Okay, well, I'll follow up with you on that one, because I do think it's going to be a very big part of everybody's campaign.
Right.
And I think it's going to be nice to be campaigning as not you, whether it's your primary opponent and or your general opponent, as that kind of comes down, because they get to say it, not having to actually have to do it.
Right.
It's easy to say what I would have done if I was there, because I didn't have the pressures of whatever it is to make the decision I made.
Well, I always say we vote on about 500-600 bills a year, and if somebody has problems with 10 of my votes, that's doing okay.
Yeah, that's
actually,
not bad.
in my book.
Because that brings up like this is a very abstract question. We'll close on this just because I think it's something interesting, because it's something we've been talking about a lot. Is like, because to put a little context on it, but I'm not going to ask you about Knox County growth stuff. But we have this growth issue in Knox County. It's been a huge issue, huge argument. Mayor Jacobs has his thing. American Canyon has her thing going on. Every time anything comes up, the local neighborhoods are like, no, and all this kind of stuff. Because my argument is I don't think anybody actually wants growth, because nobody's willing to have it next door. I think that's the reality. I think everybody likes the premise of it, as long as it doesn't affect me. But the only way you're going to allow growth is that it's affecting somebody. And if you're okay with it affecting them, then you need to be okay with it affecting you. And if you're not, then you're not okay with the basic premise. That's where I'm at on the growth thing. I think that's the truth. And what I keep joking about is like Mayor Jacobs or American Canyon or any of the council or commission needs to get up and be the big kid in the room and say, listen, this isn't a democracy, people. These are things that we have to do. And so I guess my question at all that is, is there a particular, like, you could think of where it's just like, where the overwhelming majority of emails and calls and survey answers or something like that was one way, but whatever the issue was, you knew that the right thing to do for the longevity of your district or whatever the specific of that was, that you had to kind of supersede the democratic part of, I know the majority of my constituents want X, but Y is the right answer because. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, it does.
Because I think that's one of the things that we struggle with as a nation a lot, because we like to think of democracy as this cure-all, and it's not. Because en masse, we're dumb. We just are. We're not really good at making complicated decisions en masse.
Right.
Like if we had a nationwide survey on what we need to be doing in Israel right now, blah would be the answer. We'd range from the worst of one way to the worst of the other way and everything in between. And then somehow we'd vote on a consensus and we get some weird answer that's not a good that's worse than both. And I think that's one of the realities of, especially as a nation as large as we are, and even a state, and even though we're a smaller state, I think it's still a lot of people.
We have passed Massachusetts, though. We're the 15th most populous state now. In our growth.
of all the stuff I hated about COVID, I think the acceleration of the Tennessee growth from COVID, it was happening anyway. I get it, but I think it turned it up a few notches.
It did.
Of all the problems I have with COVID, I think that's number one.
Yeah.
It's like, it felt like a switch. Like we were all locked in our houses, and then when we came back outside, there was 5,000 new neighbors in my neighborhood.
Yes.
Like that was the thing to be, is like looking out this window, I saw more people walking dogs during COVID. I was like, who are those people? Like there's like 6 people. I see them all the time. Like saw them every day walking their dogs. And then all of a sudden, as COVID hits, there's like 500 people walking their dogs. I was like, I've never seen that person before. I've never seen that person before. Where are these people coming from? I didn't know there were that many people that lived around here. And all of a sudden, they all have dogs and they're walking them in the neighborhood because they're all stuck at home.
Right.
Anyway, back to the question. The question being, like, how do you manage that? Because it's got to be, it's just the reality of the situation. Because I think that's one of the things that we don't realize we're voting for. We're voting for a person to help us make a decision.
Right.
Not to make a decision for us, but not necessarily to do whatever we tell them to do either way.
Well, we have to, I have the largest, most diverse urban district in the state. So it doesn't matter what I vote on. Somebody likes it and somebody doesn't. But it's my job to be accessible to people, so even if they don't agree with the vote that I make, they can tell me. They feel comfortable about having a good conversation with me and saying, I really wish you had voted this other way or whatever, as opposed to yelling at you or screaming at you or cussing at you. If you're around and you are open to conversations, regardless of your vote, people appreciate that because they want to be heard. And I think that's a linchpin of the way I serve is I try to be throughout our community and be accessible and be real and not be somebody that I don't feel like I'm somebody up on a pedestal. I'm just one person that's in Nashville doing my job. But I do have to take the information, and at times there are new concepts that maybe people don't understand. It's just like on our transportation bill that I carried last year. If we had not done anything and just kept on doing things the same way, just using our gas tax revenue for our roads, just the road projects on the list, not even new expansion projects, it would have taken us, kids in high school would have been senior citizens by the time we got to all those projects. We had to do something different that didn't solve all the problems, but it's a good step in the right direction. And putting $3.3 billion into our roads outside of the gas tax money extra, plus leveraging investor dollars to do the potential choice lanes in the urban area.
I get it.
We double that dollar. So if they bring $1 billion in to invest in our roads, then that gives us an extra $1 billion to use on roads in in rural or suburban areas. So, but not everybody understands that concept. The choice lane things, people go, well, I'm not going to pay to drive on the roads. And I go, you don't have to. You're already paying your gas tax. But if you don't want to drive in these choice lanes, wherever they end up, then you stay in the free lanes. But by having a choice lane, 30% of the traffic gets into the choice lanes and you go 30% faster. And so everybody benefits, but all lanes that are free now will stay free.
I'm still curious. I'm curious about some of the details out of it because, I was in Florida last year, and their tollway thing or whatever does license plates. There's no tags. There's no stop stations or whatever.
Right. They use transponders.
Yeah, and so it's just it takes a picture of your license plate. I get a bill in Tennessee 3 weeks after I get back from Florida. I mean, it was pretty clear when I was getting on. I knew that was how it was going to happen. It was just like, I don't know. It's kind of weird, but okay.
Yeah. Well, we go to my daughter and granddaughter are in Texas, and so we're a little more familiar with the way they do it in Texas. And it's not a Lexus lane because you've got people that are hourly employees that if they're late to work, they can't afford to lose an hour of work. If they're late to pick up their child at childcare, it costs them more than they pay to go in a choice lane. But it's their personal is a return on investment.
Right. The Florida one, at least, I'm assuming the Texas is similar. You can buy the pass, where it's like X number of dollars a month, or it's X number of times per use.
Actually, you just preload it. It doesn't cost to buy the pass. It's just you preload it, so it's already got it on there.
Yeah, we're all used to subscription services. Yeah. We all have Netflix and stuff. We get it.
So that's an example of something that is new and different that people didn't really understand.
I mean, around here too, I would have to think that when you do the math on how many out of state, how much really would just be a tourist dollar trap, that I would say I would think a huge percentage, especially in the Knox County region, would be non-Knox County residents.
We have at least a minimum of 30% of our gas tax revenue comes from out-of-state people driving through Tennessee, either driving to Tennessee or through it.
Yeah.
And it may be even as high as 40%, which that if we took all the money out of the general fund, that's coming from Tennessee dollars as opposed to out-of-state people helping pay.
I worked at a bar restaurant on Merchants for a long time, and they talk about hotel motel tax and all that kind of stuff. The amount of people that I served that came in when I was working at that place that were on their way to or from Florida, or were coming from or going back to Ohio, was ungodly. Like I couldn't, like 60-70% every day. Like every single day.
75% of the population of the United States is within a day's drive of Knoxville.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about Knoxville.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can get
it's a drive, but we can get to Disney.
Yes,
we could be at Disney by open tomorrow if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not with the weather, but you get what I mean.
So, there's times that you do have to do your due diligence. And, I mean, you always do your due diligence. But, I mean, as far as really looking at the facts, taking in the opinions on both sides, and figuring out which is the best way to vote. And so you don't just say, okay, 4 people were for it and 5 people were against it, so I'm voting against it. But you do that as much as anything to get people's thoughts on it, why, what their valid points are. That helps you ask questions in committee meetings or on the floor. So you make sure those answers get asked in public comment, and you work through the process. So it's, but a lot of it is just being here, being present, being at, like I say, I did 5 Christmas parades. And most of them were wet, but I mean, but
you know what? I'd feel bad for you, but you were in the car. I was out walking.
No, I was walking in every parade.
Did you get out walk?
I walked in every parade.
I was walking.
I do not ride.
All right, I like it.
I do not ride at all. I'm
you didn't get in the little Volkswagen with Tim and his little car.
No, he rides. I don't.
I love it.
I like walking.
I love that car. That's just it's such a funny signature to have.
Yes,
get your steps in for the day. Yeah.
But anyway.
But
but it's a process, and it really is just an honor to serve. I never thought I'd be doing this. I thought I was going to be a disability provider till I retired, and because just serving folks that had no voice and had nobody. But I felt like that God put me on a different trajectory, and I feel like I'm effective. I'm not a screamer. I don't try to attack people. I like to have conversations with people, but I usually can, I always say if I get 70% done of what I'm wanting to try to get done on a piece of legislation, sure. I've done well. And I try to work with people and be a team player. Even with just
32 people, that's a lot of people to get to agree on one thing. Because I'm very, just on the pure politics side, not government, not anything else, I'm very curious to watch this race, A, because you're in my district, but B, because you have a primary challenger from the right. It's pretty clearly a little further right than you are. And then you also have a Democrat in the general, which you generally have Democrat in the general. And at least traditionally, District 6 hasn't had a huge left-leaning, left bend to it. But at least subsets of 6 have been pushing a little further left over the years. And so I'm very curious, just on the process part, on how this is going to play out. I'm very curious how hard right. I'm very curious how the primary is going to treat it, just because I don't know. Especially because we have our weird open primary thing, and I don't know which primary I'm pulling yet, even though I technically shouldn't be able to pull either one, but I'm gonna. Don't tell anybody. And so I'm very excited about to watch this one. I'm very excited to meet the other players involved and talk to them about it. And I think your general platform, if I understand it correctly, is what we've talked about, everything you've already done. You and I think you just gave your general pitch. Right there is that. It's not a loud screaming thing. We're not here to put on a show. We're here to get some work done, and approachability is probably number one. And I'll agree with that. That's what I told you at the parade. I said I will say this officially right now, that your office has been the best constituent services office that I've had to deal with. I've chosen to deal with.
Thank you.
In all my different in all my different pitch and fits about X, Y, or Z. I at least get something, and somebody who's trying to help, who I feel like is at least trying to understand what I'm asking for, so they can try to figure out where the right, because there's a lot of parts and pieces at play here,
right?
And I like even things that I am truly invested in, I can't keep up with.
Right.
So to imagine that your office split against my very small subsect of all the things that go on in the state of Tennessee has a good understanding as I do is an overstatement. So, Becky, I really appreciate you. If you want to do some your website plug or anything like that real quick, and then we'll get you out of here.
Just BeckyMassey.com. But I do. You can email me in my office and go you can follow the General Assembly, like you say. You can watch committees. You can watch floor session. You can look up. We're a nationally award-winning website as far as accessibility, but capital.tn.gov. And through that, you can click on a link to email me. If you'd like my e-newsletter, which I send out weekly during session and try to give people information, please do so. And we try to keep people informed on not really the hot topic issues that they're going to be reading about everywhere, but the ones that affect just everybody and just the normal people, and what might interest you may not interest somebody else. So we like to try to get.
I get the newsletter. I read it. It's not overwhelmingly complicated or deep or thick. It's not like there's 10 million things in it, but there's also like you're saying, it's a good. Here's what's going on.
It's a little longer than it probably should be, but I like to let people decide what they want to read about.
I think it's about right. It doesn't you're not exhausted by the end of it. You feel like you picked up the general points of a lot of different things, and
I don't try to be a super slick person. I mean, like with a little short, teeny email that just says on here, give money type thing or whatever else. I mean, I want to give people information and I want to be accessible. So,
well, I can attest to that. As I said, the best constituent services in the game as far as I've had to deal with. So, Becky, it's always good to see you. We'll catch up here again very soon, and we'll get you out the door.
Okay. Thank you.
See, I told you. We did it. Becky Mass, everybody. Oh, yeah. Came out, braved the winter weather wonderland that we have been living in this week. What a crazy-ass week as that goes. But yeah, so Sam's going to be in. We're going to do a taping of the regular show later on tonight, which will release tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and release this on Friday afternoon just so everybody can get their hands on it if they want to. And I'm sure me and Sam will talk about this, among other things. Despite the weather, we had plenty of stuff going on to talk about. So, 24 election cycle is in full swing. We've got a gajillion candidates, a gajillion votes, a gajillion seats on the market. So stick with us. We'll help you figure out who can actually do anything about whatever they want to talk about. My pet peeves. Anyway, almost screaming everybody, your favorite podcast provider, like, friend, follow, share, 5-star review, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all those places. Do whatever you can to help other people find us, because that's the only way we're going to get better elected officials. Because of me. I mean, more information, more people voting intelligently, not just voting because it's my duty. You vote because you vote for people because they're going to do the job correctly, in your opinion. Not because they're a party member or whatever. You know what I mean. Anyway, almost screaming everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.